The Ambix of Plenty, a short story. When a sheep farmer and his wife discover the secret of the ages, two mysterious characters, full of allegory, arrive to bring them into line. Apart from having a five-sided name, the tidy town of Quintessence was four-sided in every conceivable way. 2 roads led in and 2 roads led out in almost orthogonal convenience. The streetscapes, made by regular and earnest men, were of rectilinear certitude, and most of the buildings, from the miners' cottages of yore to the corrugated iron shacks of post-war splendour, were best described as boxes. The mere tidiness of the town, too, was altogether quadratic, and even the star upon the Southern Star Hotel, centrepiece of the established order, beckoned right angles in a square-arm design defying even the slightest creative swagger. The post office, however, was a bold exception. Its red brick facade poked fun at four-square hospitality, somehow surviving numerous planning objections in a baroque ostentation, complete with multi-dimensional frilly bits along the punctilious laneway down the side. It closed in 1987, that year of callous austerities, and reopened shortly after as a struggling knick-knack emporium run by hairy outsiders from Belgium who were seeking a better way. It was into this post office, the least straightforward construction in the town, that 2 dapper gentlemen in shiny shoes wandered with purpose one lonely Saturday morning. The bell rang and a Belgian came from out the back. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" he smiled. "Good morning," said one. "We are wondering if you might help us." The stranger swiftly adduced from an innocent-looking plastic bag a golden locket, oddly ornate, upon a similar chain. "Do you recognise this?" he asked. The Belgian put on his spectacles and considered. "I do," said he. "We sold it a few months ago. Very nice piece." It was laid down upon the counter. Worn and hindered, it was nevertheless not olden, though it sported a Latin quippy across its smooth backing and the letters Aqua Regia Profundus. "A good price too," said the Belgian, recollecting. "I don't suppose," said the other stranger, stepping forward, "that you recall where you came by this item originally, do you?" "It's an odd sort of bagatelle," said the shopkeeper. "We don't see many things like this around here. Solid gold, but not," he added, "the usual sort of gold alloy, which is odd as well." What he meant was that the local gold, dragged out of the earth's drastic and unforgiving bosom, was invariably zinkish. But this piece was rather European, or at least not smelted quite routinely. He was an amateur on metal curios and the baubles of the wealthy. "Indeed," said the strangers. "Do you recall who brought it in?" "Sure," said the hairy Belgian. "That'd be Bob Barnswell's wife, Hot Matilda." The strangers looked at each other, pleased. "Barnswell," they said together. "Barnswell." "And I don't suppose," one of them then said, "you might be able to tell us where we could find Mr. and Mrs. Barnswell, do you? It would be very helpful." The Belgian looked up curious. "What's this about?" he asked. The hidden Belgian almost came out from behind. "Just an inquiry," said the stranger. But an unusual one, and the shopkeeper was not inclined to be too specific after that. It was no secret all the same that the Barnswells lived 66 miles out of town, on the 2-laned route to Moronglee, where they kept 729 acres of shaggy lambs under the Victoria's sun. "Bob drives into town most Saturday mornings to buy the papers and his pipe tobacco," the Belgian said with some hirsute guile. "So if I see him, I'll let him know you're on the lookout, will I?" No, said the strangers. "That won't be necessary." They offered no further explanation and returned to their car, a sleek sedan as black as Melanosis, which the Belgian noted had the licence plate Aurum 79 in lettering of Cinnabar, and they drove off with the smooth and authoritative overture of the wheel. In due course that same morning they arrived at the Barnswell door, a steady object effacing but a modest homestead amidst the endless paddocks. The house yard, decorated with one red rose, was unspectacular, and thereabouts were sheds and shearing fixtures, most of them ramshackle and makeshift, with a hay shed and a tool shed lean-to up against the chicken stall, and kennels, and tractor housing, and a woodpile going grey. There was no car in the garage. Bob, indeed, had gone to town. The strangers went knocking anyway, and in a moment or two, Hot Matilda opened the door. "Mrs. Barnswell?" She assumed they were Mormons. "Yes," she said. "We're Protestants. Thank you all the same." "My name is Henshaw, Thomas Henshaw," said one, "and this is Mr. Ashmole," who nodded blankly and said, "Ma'am." "We're from the Taxation Department." "Oh," said Hot Matilda, surprised. "So you're not here to tell me how Jesus purloined the wayward Polynesians?" "No, ma'am. We're here to discuss this." And he held up the gold-chained oddment as he had shown the hairy Belgian in the many-sided red-brick old post office. "Do you recognise this locket, ma'am?" asked Mr. Ashmold, looming on the veranda rural. Hot Matilda was quick on her toes. "I don't know," she said. "I might." "We've traced it to you, ma'am," Mr. Henshaw reported, "and we have reason to believe that you sold it in town several months ago." "The Taxation Department, hey?" "That's right, ma'am. The Taxation Department. Since when does the Taxation Department take an interest in a lady's necklace?" she wanted to know. "Are you sure you're not Mormons?" "No, ma'am. We're from the Taxation Department, and we're interested in this jewellery." Hot Matilda had another look. "Well, yes," she eventually conceded. "It is one of mine." "And where did you purchase it, ma'am?" they immediately inquired, going shady with mysterious intent. "I didn't," she said. "I made it." The taxation agents looked at each other with their eyebrows ticking boxes. "Is that so?" they said, interested beyond the casual greeting. Hot Matilda felt hot with the intensity of inquiry. "I make jewellery," she said, "and from time to time I might sell a piece or two. Is that illegal these days?" After which she pleaded dumb, saying she had not a niggle to declare at all at tax time. "Boy," she said, "you guys are really desperate if that's what this is all about. Isn't a lady able to make a sterling quid from soldered tinkering without declaring every dollar?" The strangers made no argument to the contrary. "May we inquire," asked Mr. Henshaw, "where you acquired the precious metal from which the jewellery is made?" "You may inquire," said our heroine, "but I may not tell you." She was suddenly reluctant, continuing, "I really had no idea I had to report earnings from a hobby." Resorting to their levers then, the taxmen dropped their charming guise and told her that, yes sirree, taxation evasion commands a multi-angled penalty such that every culprit soon regrets. In serious cases they might confiscate your television and recoup the wicked earnings, and it goes on your tax file forever, an indelible stain. It was a dire item of intimidation. Hot Matilda trembled. "The issue, though," spake the Ashmole, "is whence did you acquire the gold of which this dangly is consolidated?" Or words to that effect. Hot Matilda explained. Her husband Bob was a prospector, and from time to time he stumbles on a nugget and heavy flecks of dust among the quartz reefs beyond the back of winding creek beds down in the lofty King William Ranges. The taxman looked at her unbelieving. "I have my hobby, and he has his," she insisted. They wanted to see her working desk, location of her homely jewels. It was set up as she said. The table was emerald green, illumined by a single lamp, and her tinker tools displayed the jeweller's art. "Can I claim depreciation on these tools then?" she asked. The twosome, singular in their duality, were humorless all the same. "We're investigators, ma'am, not accountants." By the time Bob returned with his newspapers and tobacco, they had gone, but even then they had vowed to come back with a briefcase full of prying. Bob said they sounded a lot like Mormons, and perhaps Hot Matilda had failed to understand. Did they say anything about gold plates under the hill Cumorah? He wondered, intent. Hot Matilda thought they looked suspicious, and noted that their car was as black as melanosis. A week went by before they called again. This time Bob remained, and they carried files plump with papers. They pointed to a damning dollar sign. "Just how much money do you make from prospecting in the previous per annum?" they were eager to inquire. "It's just a hobby," the Bob did lament. "So not much at all." "But you don't declare it on your tax each fiscal year," Mr. Ashmole underlined. Bob knew his rights. "The Historic Act of 1863, he declared, getting political. "You don't have to declare what you find yourself." Smelly bands of drunken miners had burned down their own hotel to secure the rights of the prospecting man. It was the Australian way. The taxman stayed silent. Then Ashmole spoke again. "All the same," he said, "it seems you have made a lot of money." They had rummaged his accounts. "How do you explain your good fortune?" asked the second one. Bob hesitated and looked answerless. Hot Matilda saved the awkward moment. "Goat's cheese," she announced. "Inner urban trendoids can't get enough." Mr. Henshaw was plainly unimpressed. His face remained leaden. "You made all that money from goat's cheese?" "Well, they eat it 3 meals a day in some suburbs," Hot Matilda retorted, as if these gentlemen ought to be more knowing in the sociology of dairy. It was a ruse, yet a compelling one. It was entirely true. A lucrative class of overeducated malcontents, whole suburbs of them, for whom bicycles, soybeans and goat's cheese were ways to hate the British Empire. Henshaw put down his filings. "It's strange," he said, gritting his teeth, "but the gold in the locket doesn't seem to be a local metal." Barnswell jigged his rugged shoulders. "What am I?" he said. "A metallurgist." "I don't know," said the stranger. "Are you?" The point, however, was that somebody was, and their analysis had determined not a trace of zinkish inclination so imprintable upon the red fibres of the ancient land. The implication was obvious. This was true even of the gold extracted from the volcanic shells of the lofty King William Ranges. The taxman had one further question. What exactly, they pondered, do you understand by the words aqua regia profundus? They were happy to hear from either Barnswell on theirs. Once more, Hot Matilda was quickly dismissive. "Isn't it the name of a Norwegian neo-folk ensemble?" she suggested. At this, the departmental duo went away, but said they were decidedly unhappy. The copper days of harvest became a turbid distance across the glutted womb of the earth. The moonlight hung massive over the northern deserts. Sweltering mists percolated among the rock formations like the retort of Zosimos. The forest floor was crisp with dark debris and eucalyptus leaves. It was a forlorn Saturday morning once more, and Bob had driven to Quintessence and back and sat engrossed upon the veranda rural with his trusty pipe in hand. Then, out of the looming drifts, came the car again, still as black as melanosis. The Mormons had returned. This time, Bob knew there would be trouble. Mr. Henshaw and Mr. Ashmole walked up the wobbly steppings and had those knowing smirks. "Good morning, Mr. Barnswell," they did rehearse. "I don't know. Is it?" wondered Bob. "Perhaps not," Mr. Henshaw agreed. They were armed this time with further paperwork and were in no mood for evasive inquiry. They commented on the lovely day and the warm odours of Hot Matilda's scones just then transmuting in the oven. They were just in time for a cup of tea. "According to our records," the Ashmole started, underlining You have an extremely interesting shopping list of late from a range of chemical suppliers. And he zoned his gaze upon rustic Bob, who pretended to be entirely unenlightened. Like what? Said the farmer. The ash mole produced an official inventory from his upper pocket. It seems you have purchased of recent times alone, he said, and then he read it out. 14 ounces of stannic chloride, 30 ounces of sodium sulfate, 3 vials of ammonium carbonate, and another 4 of ammonium hydroxide. Ferrium disulfide, 6 ounces, 1 bottle of arsenic dioxysulfide, a kilogram of magnesium arsenate, undetermined quantities of silver nitrate, and antimonious oxychloride, or the white powder of allegory. Mr. Henshaw looked assured. How do you explain, he asked, why you would be buying all of these? Bob was resolute. Modern farming, he said. Mr. Henshaw raised an eyebrow. The white powder of allegory. At this juncture, Hot Matilda came out from the kitchen and announced that, hallelujah, her scones had arisen, and she wanted to know if the gentlemen fancied strawberry jam. They did, but they also fancied cutting through the cans and getting down to the ever-burning light of truth. Why don't we cut through the cans and get down to the ever-burning light of truth? Mr. Henshaw suggested. We all know what's going on here, don't we? You're not really from the taxation department, are you? Hot Matilda suggested. It still seemed possible they might be Mormons. She was wrong. No, we are, said Mr. Ashmole, but from a very specialised task force, you might say. Henshaw peered at the barn swells and said it plainly. Could we see what's in your hay shed, Mr. Barnswell? Hay, said the Barnswells both together. Silage of the common man. The taxmen eased back. We'd like to see, they said. The edges of the sky were as blue-green as ferric sulfate lixivated in a bath of roasted cobalt. Hot Matilda changed the topic to the weather, but belatedly Bob had realised that their coagulations had probably come unto an end. I suspect, he said to Hot Matilda, that we don't have a choice. The taxmen confirmed it. No, you don't, they said. There was hay in the hay shed, but beyond the hay was the laboratory outstanding, and in the midst of the laboratory outstanding was the Ambix of Plenty. Bob had constructed it in his spare time from instructions in a Rosicrucian magazine. The evenings can be lonely and starry-skied in the vast, flat sheep country, and a farmer needs a shed for his recreation. He had to improvise here and there. The lid was tied on with strands of hayband, and he'd fitted an old water tank as a makeshift athanor, and his Kirkabit really was a Kirkabit, but it hissed and fizzed better than the drunkard's still, and accomplished the eternal conjuration of the metals. The taxmen weren't surprised. The Ambix of Plenty, said Henshaw, as if he'd seen one a dozen times. Bob explained that, being inventive, he had established that the prima materia, mysteriously eluded, could possibly be concentrated into sheep manure, and once the Ambix of Plenty did its trick, would emerge as pure gold the other side. Mr. Ashmole was visibly impressed. The organic stone, he nodded, the tincture of resolution, the gloria chrysopia, the grossa lua, agne sublimata. It's a hobby, shrugged the Barnswell. Perhaps, said Mr. Henshaw, but you've got to see it from the taxman's point of view. And from the taxman's point of view, plenty is a problem. There is an immutable matrix in which the laws of raw philosophy grind into the laws of economics, and the sublimation of resources vitrifies all human endeavour. Oh, chunky paradox! Man might take the yucky and turn it into yum, separate opposing components and effect the exaltation of means, but its vapours soon get up the nose of bland reality, where it impacts upon gross domestic product. You see, saith the Henshaw, if you can produce an endless supply of everything, ergo your Ambix of Plenty here, Mr. Barnswell, then very quickly nothing is worth anything at all. Do you see the problem with that? It is scarcity, added the Ashmole, that makes the world go round. This is to say nothing, his colleague continued, about the impact on the Australian dollar. We can't allow it, I'm afraid. We just can't have people making gold out of sheep shit. It makes some important people very uncomfortable at night. It was a serious matter, and in the end the laws of real production trumped the effortless revivifications of the elixir eterni. Bob Barnswell was no economist, but he did appreciate the floppy way-stops of supply and demand. Hot Matilda still protested. She said it was called quantitative easing, but the taxmen were adamantine. The Ambix of Plenty has to go, they insisted. The taxman speaks. Then what are we supposed to do? Asked Hot Matilda. Stick to sheep, Mr. Henshaw recommended. And goat's cheese, recommended Mr. Ashmole. They made it plain in any case that alchemy is not a proper measure for the rural man. When next Farmer Bob drove into Quintessence navigating the four-sided streets and bumped into the hairy Belgians, he was alerted too late of the stranger's menacing presence. By then local rumours had gone around that the Barnswells had been naughty and were chastised for leaving earnings undeclared, although everyone understood. With lean years of wanted innings unpredictably mingled and plump years of ferment rare, how was a farmer to satisfy the taxman who was keen to slap on a provisional levy convicted in the assumption of static worth? What if suddenly the Indonesians cancel Ramadan and the price of lamb goes Christian? What if goat's cheese is replaced with labna? The bureaucrats in Canberra wouldn't understand. It remained true, however, that an honest prospector is beyond the taxman's reach, a principle of liberty that had defined the nascent nation. Thieving bastards, people said. Thieving bastards, said the Bob. The relevant Belgian met him on the frilly steps. They came in with one of those lockets that Hot Matilda sells from time to time, he reported. Yes, I know, said Bob. They traced it back to us. It was an unhappy circumstance, but he didn't blame the Belgians for using the Barnswell name. Did you notice not licence plate on their car, as black as melanosis? Asked the Belgian. Bob said he hadn't. It was odd. Aurum 79. In lettering of Cinnabar. What do you suppose that might mean? I have no idea, said Bob, although he had indeed. He walked off to buy his pipe tobacco, but there came a troubling thought. He stopped as a bold extraction hit upon his ruminations of the morning. It was a morning that glistened with dewdrops, and woolly things frolicked in the paddocks to the tune of the rising sun. He had taken the Ambix of Plenty to the dump and watched its inhumation in the landfill, and Hot Matilda went back to making rings and lockets from merely ordinary components. What a bitter fulmination! The departmentals had supervised the destruction. Upon a hunch, however, Bob dropped into the municipal library. The embalmed head of Lance, the hero of Dumb Beluga, was a visiting display, caput mortem, and the crowds milled around. It was like an emblem of nature's need for man's redemption. The embryonic bone lies hidden in the clay. The imperfect wastrel is lost in distant lands. Life is an ingot, still lumpy with sinful rust. The volcanic shells of the King William Ranges were mixing bowls of an industry divine, where the demiurgic hand had stirred the primal custard. Bob settled down in the history section and thumbed through many books. In a while, he found what he was after. In the processes of the English civil confrontations, he uncovered, illustrious beyond the restorations of good-looking Charles II, there was a certain Mr. Elias Ashmole, an antiquary, officer of arms, a numismatic man, and a student of the alchemical arts. There was a portrait there, and it sported the very face of the gentleman discerning. There was a curly wig, certainly, but the features were exactly like the ever-burning light of truth. It was unmistakable. Mr. Ashmole, indeed. The Rosicrucians, it seemed, were right all along. Hot Matilda had always said there was a ruthless order, and it spanned across the centuries, slurping from the water trough of youth. The regal water is profound. And what, if not the tablets of mystery, were the golden plates under the hill Cumorah? Bob turned the page. There was Thomas Henshaw, born 1618, diplomat, courtier, a worrisome figure in the annals of occult intrigue. He was an alchemist too. He had sailed to Orange, Holland. How could it be that their visitors were unaging? A locket on a golden chain is a long tradition, said Hot Matilda. She was the wise Sophia in this 5-part tale. It turned out to be a Saturday morning of new rectitude. A town of steady design was reassuring. A mystical name might adorn the maps of dusty colonies, but right angles are the stuff of righteous planning. Every farmer knows that dissolution precedes the fertile rain. The sticky humus is replete with the souls of a coming age. Solve et coagula again. Such are the cycles. It occurred to Bob that the fifth element was unspoken. That is why such a square town had such a 5-sided name. Quintessence might allude to the essence as 5, but the streets and houses stand in regular formation, fourishly and elemental, and that is how it ought to be, after all. And that is why the finite realm doesn't abide by perpetual abundance. Bob purchased his tobacco and drove home for scones, full of the supreme realization that Mormon taxmen had been chasing the Ambix of Plenty for a very long time.